Good afternoon. On behalf of AAE Board Member and Director of Professional Development, Neil Otto, it's my pleasure to welcome you to another webinar hosted by the American Association for Employment and Education. Today's topic is leveraging technology to complete your recruitment toolkit. My name is Tim Newbert and I serve as AAE's Executive Director. Please allow me to cover just a few housekeeping matters before we begin with today's topic. During the webinar, all attendees will be muted by default. However, today's settings will allow you to activate your, no, it won't. However, you may use the chat feature within Zoom. When using chat, you are encouraged to change the recipient default to all presenters and attendees to maximize participation. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees and the public. Virtual career fairs have highlighted an essential strategy that is required in a fiercely competitive recruitment landscape. HR teams and hiring managers want a platform that provides ease of use, ongoing access to candidate data, and unrivaled customer support. For more than 10 years, CareerEco has been hosting online events to complement districts' recruitment efforts, and the feedback is amazing. I am joined today by Gayle Oliver-Plath, founder and CEO of CareerEco, and Christina Vandewater, CareerEco's client implementation manager, to help you leverage technology and choose the platform that's right for your recruitment strategies. Thanks for joining us today, Gayle and Christina. I'll now turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tim. Listen, really appreciate the opportunity to share a bit more. We are thrilled to be able to say that we have been hosting virtual events for, as you said, 10 plus years now. And of course, you know, with the pandemic, this really was accelerated. And I think people started to really understand the importance of having a strategy that can complement what you might be doing in a more traditional way. So what I wanted to do today and really feel like could be useful is to just think through how are you leveraging technology, particularly related to virtual events, and how do you choose a platform? How do they work? If you haven't done them yet, I'm assuming a lot of you have, but if you haven't done them yet, what is that like these days? And then maybe just a touch on, how do you prepare for, how do you publicize events, that kind of thing. So anyway, with that said, I'll go to leveraging technology. So we knew, having done this for so many years prior to COVID, that there was a tremendous reason for virtual events. The ease of connecting, the ability to have the lower cost of recruitment, because obviously you have this ability to do things in a very efficient way. And you look at the flexibility around, being able to be located anywhere, either as a job seeker or as an employer. And obviously that all fits very, very well with virtual recruitment. The extended reach, certainly in a very competitive landscape, is tremendously important. Many of you, as recruiters of teachers and other administrators that are in the school district system, you're looking at ways to be creative, and certainly the ability to extend the reach and be able to access candidates that may not be in your local area is a very important part of all of this. The idea of using the virtual tools like video, one-to-one interviewing style throughout the course of an event can be very important. And also, I think the access to data. I mean, obviously, when you go to more traditional recruitment events, a lot of times the people that might come by your booth, if they don't have a resume handy, or many of the people you don't get to visit with during the experience, you just may not be able to ultimately recruit them. Whereas in a virtual event, if done properly, you would have access. And then also, I think just increasing the diversity of your candidate pool. Obviously, there can be challenges around getting to locations, barriers for people that are, maybe not in your local area. And so allowing them to overcome the barriers really can, I think, enhance the diversity of your entire candidate pool. And with that in mind, I think all these are good reasons why, regardless of a pandemic or any other barriers to travel, these are good reasons to have a technology component to your recruitment. So then when you think about, what kind of platform do I choose? And obviously there have been a lot of platforms that have come on the scene in the last year and a half. And I think there's variations around all of them. You've got to find the one that's right for you and your team. We look at some of these variables that are on this page here. One is whether you want to be charged on a per event or more of a long-term contract. A lot of times people don't have the budget to commit to long-term contracts. So having the ability to have a particular vendor that can work with you in either one of those scenarios, I think is very important. The idea of reliability and system performance, we got a lot of feedback from different stakeholders throughout this pandemic, and not every system, especially ones that are very, very new to the marketplace, are going to perform as expected. So the reliability of that platform, the ability for it to do what it promised to do, I think all those are attributes of how you need to look at a platform. And part of that is longevity. Part of that is understanding whether or not they are, a technology that's just trying to pivot into virtual events, or whether they've been at it for a long time. The technical features, what do you want in the product? Certainly, I think at a minimum, you've got to make sure that any platform you're using is going to have that video component. Without question, I think that's an important aspect. But what's the learning curve? Some of these platforms that are out there are going to have a lot of variations on things that you can do, and ultimately, they can be very graphic intensive to the point where they're difficult to even use, and could limit some of your accessibility. And at the same time, they can have a very steep learning curve. So I think you just need to think through, what's important to you with those features, and then does it look like something that your team can quickly and easily get up to speed on? Because at a high level glance, I can tell you that we've had so many people really come back with the fact that ease of use is a really critical part of their decision making. You're going to have stakeholders that are some much more technical than others. So keep in mind that that is a component you should be considering when you look at a platform. The format, some of these platforms are going to have by appointment, some of them are going to have a queue, some of them are going to have open sessions. These are all aspects that I think you have to consider. What do you want in that fashion, the way that people are going to interact? And then I said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it again. Access to data. I mean, in the end of the day, if you don't have access to the information as candidates register leading up to the resume bank of, the candidate pool, and then ultimately their contact information so that you can actually recruit them after the event, those are really critical things that you need to look for in a platform. You want to have access to that, not just up to the event or during the event, but after the event, because you ultimately, if you don't get to interact with some of those that you're really interested in, you need to make sure that you can reach out to those and go ahead and be proactive with recruitment, because that's going to be required in such a competitive landscape. The other part is support. What is your vendor doing? Are they hard to get in touch with? Are they responsive? Are they going to deal with real-time issues that happen no matter what you do as a platform? Some of your users are not going to have educated themselves ahead of time. So you got to know that that particular vendor is going to be available real time. So we've worked with a lot of different districts. We've worked with state organizations. This is just a quick view. What I'd like to do is now take it to the platform and show you just a little bit about how events can work. And obviously this is not vendor neutral. This is us. This is what we do. So I'm sharing it with that perspective in mind. But I think it'll give you a good idea of what some other people have been doing. And also I think it'll give you a good idea around what we do, and maybe some of the things you might be looking for when you're considering virtual event platforms. So I think what I want to just start out with is that a lot of people are looking at ways to expand their reach that can be hosting their own events, or it could be part of a group. So because we've been doing this for so long, we've worked with a lot of colleges and universities to host their virtual events. And that can be a really good talent pool when you're looking at those that are just getting through with their undergraduate, maybe even their graduate education, and they're maybe a talent pool that you really want to tap into. So here's an example where this is an event that's being sponsored by a group of universities. So it's a 20+ universities. They're all coming together to make it easy for employers to be part of their online event. So when you look at an event like this, and you consider, what are the kinds of organizations that are participating. We have found these kinds of group events have been a great resource for school districts. And so if you look at some of the examples here, you'll see that there are a variety of school districts that wanted to be part of this event, might be located all across the country, and they could showcase the kind of degrees they're looking for, what types of positions, where they're located, and ultimately you can also show more about your school. So we call this a profile page. This is just a good example here. And Duval has been really active in their recruitment, and they will be part of doing some of these group events as one way of extending their reach. And you can see by example that, they've got a video here on their profile page more about their organization. And then if you look at the job posting section, you'll notice they also have a listing of some of the positions that they have that they're trying to recruit for. So this is the kind of example where if you're in an event and you want to make sure that your groups can really showcase more about their particular, either the district at large and or the specific schools within the district and the positions they're trying to recruit for. All of this kind of information can live on that event site, and that can be really, really useful in terms of showcasing more about the people that are participating in that event as organizations. And then ultimately that just gives you a great example of what the job seeker then can come into the experience and really ask about. Now, if you look at this example here, you're going to see this is really designed around the configuration of joining together a region. So you've got, this is Central Texas Association.
Gayle, I'm still seeing the PowerPoint.
You are? Oh
Yeah.
no, I'm sorry. Thanks for letting me know that. Okay, let's see here. Let me stop the share here and go back over here. So we're back to this
there
now.
we
Can
go.
you see
Yep.
it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry about that, Tim. I almost asked you the question if you could see the screen because I couldn't tell. But my message down below was letting me know that it was being shared. So I'm sorry about that. So I am going to back up here for just a minute. This was the example that I was showcasing about that group event. The Southern Alliance, in this case, these 20 plus universities. And here's an example where, again, if you look at the listing, then you can see the schools, some of these schools that were showcasing what they are wanting to highlight with the kinds of majors they were looking for, whether these positions are part-time or full-time, and their location. So as a job seeker, if I were interested in teaching roles and so forth, I could go into that event, narrow down out of the 100 plus organizations that were in that event, and I could really narrow down the schools that were interesting to me. And then I could go ahead, like I said, and showcase as a school more about the in this case the county and the public school system that I'm representing and the jobs that I'm specifically recruiting for. So you can see they had a great listing of positions, and as a job seeker, when I click on those details, then you can obviously see more about the role, but I'd need to go ahead and register. So what's good about that is then all the candidates are being compiled into the database, and you would have access ultimately to all those registrants, along with those registrants being able to, if they wanted, follow your instructions around the posting. So if you want them to go ahead and drop a resume, send a resume, go through applicant tracking, all of that is part of this posting section that's tied to any of the profiles. So that's a really good example of being able to show more about the organization and at the same time highlight the jobs. And then sometimes people even have point of contact information on these sections here. And this is where I was showing you, they had a video, they've got more of an explanation. These profile pages sometimes are very in-depth and sometimes they're very brief. It just depends on whether or not you want to highlight a lot of detail here or not. here's an example where I was going with this region. So this is Central Texas Association, and this is a regional sort of conglomeration of people coming together to say, if you're looking in this particular region, then you might want to come to this fair. And what that does is it allows those that are very specific to a target area to know the kind of roles that are being publicized within that geographic area. So this can be a really good way to come together. And you'll notice this is the personnel administrator. So they're pooling their effort together to make this particular event happen. And if you look at the example where the job seekers are going to click to learn more about the organizations that are in this, you'll notice that it's different districts, the degree types that they require, and then the certification. So if I'm looking specifically based on my certification and or the kinds of positions I'm trying to look for, I can quickly narrow down out of that broader group those particular types of positions that fall under this category based on my certification. So all of this can be a really good way of narrowing down, and that becomes particularly important to the job seeker, but at the same time I think it's beneficial to you as the host to be able to have different profile pages and different details shown on each one of these. The statewide organizations have also hosted these kinds of events. Sarah is one of those. They've hosted multiple events throughout the years, and their particular format similarly would bring together different districts. What you'll notice about the platform and the way we typically showcase things, if there's an ability for you to join that event, like the Southern Alliance Fair that I was just showing you, there's always going to be a learn more, and that learn more would tell you which sort of price point there is on that event. Most of these events, and also just what's the nature of that event, right? Is it narrow? Is it specific to a group, or is it broader? These, in this case, in order to be part of this event, you had to be one of the districts within the state of South Carolina. So there can be things that narrow down the scope of the event, and there can be things that broaden it. So that said, some of these collective group events could have some parameters around it that you want to pay attention to, but also just notice the pricing. And typically when it's a group event, they would be more around the 300, 250, 300, 400, somewhere in there, just depending on the host. But that just is a very, very affordable way of participating. So again, you've got a listing of those that decided to participate, the areas they're recruiting for, the county, that's another good example. These are in our platform. All of these views here are custom to that event. So we can highlight certain information based on what's important to that particular host. And if you look at some of the examples where a particular county is showcasing through an event, you'll notice here they put video in the sidebar. It's a great idea. When it's your own event, you would get to decide the time frame. So some of these events go all day, some of them go a period of the day, some of them are narrow by the candidate pool they're trying to attract. So you can see by this example with Greenville, early childhood and elementary. Whereas and so you'll notice on this particular page when the job seekers are going to click learn more, and they can see these are all the different elementary schools that wanted to participate in that fair. So each one of these elementary schools then can have their own profile page and show a little bit more about them as a school. So a good way to highlight, share information. Same kind of principle, but this one, again, different time, similar in the recruitment cycle, but a different date. And then you'll notice that this was focused on the secondary schools. So you can really, like I said, you can break down the information according to, how you want to sort of triage the job seeker looking at the event and what kind of groups you're trying to pull together, whether it's, at a county level, whether it's at a, a state level. All flexibility around how you want to come together as schools and or groups and or just your own event specifically. So the thing that I thought was neat about this one specifically is they had some different chat rooms that were devoted to different topics. So in other words, the English as a second language and, some of the general questions that relate to the application process or certification. These kinds of rooms at a county level, their HR team could have their own topics outside of the the specific schools, where if you wanted just to go into that particular school's room during the event, you could interact with them in a way that would give you more insight into the respective schools versus me going in to find out more from the Career Center or the certification and so forth. So this really, again, can be a good way to keep the registered job seekers engaged and wanting to come into the event, visit with different groups, and then also maybe have content around that event that could be very useful. Now, within this one, you've got the idea of just a region again. And if you look at the Job Seekers Learn More here, you'll notice there's always two tabs, and this is on the chat schedule tab. Now, this is what we consider to be an open-ended event. And what's nice about these open-ended events is that as a job seeker, I can go in at any point in time that I'd like to visit during the published hour. So whatever the time frame on that event is, you can narrow the hours accordingly by group. So you'll notice there's some variations here. So maybe they didn't have the bandwidth from their team to necessarily be available during the entire duration. So they had to scale back their hours just a little bit. But you'll also notice here that, it's topical. So you can have multiple rooms, you can have various topics. And I liked this one just simply because it actually called out that there was a stipend in that particular case. So really clever idea. So just think about when you're hosting these events, some of the things that are going to make your group marketable. And I think that's part of obviously the whole premise of, virtual recruitment is the efficiency, but also, what is the distinctiveness? What are you sharing on your profile page? What's the messaging that you're putting out there about the event? And as you can see here, they're specifically breaking out this service center had their own room. So you could share content, and it could be broad. It could be, about the job search process. It could be about the benefits at a particular district, or it could be all kinds of things that might be useful to them, again, related to maybe certification or things for people that maybe want to become teachers, and they're not there yet. But this whole education process around this career path can be very, very helpful and useful as part of the tone of an event. One of the things you'll notice here is that there's a time window that's more evening focused. And I think that's nice to consider as part of this whole virtual aspect, because clearly for many of us, the idea of going to more traditional recruitment events can be more challenging after you get into the evening hours. Whereas I think in this sort of virtual setting, that can be a great time frame. If you're willing to, as a group, host those hours, then I think you can have job seekers that would be really excited, particularly if they're those that are considering a change, a career change, and they really do have daytime jobs. And depending on the time of the year, it might also be best for the existing teachers to work around their traditional work hours. So another really good idea from this particular group. I think with all of these, you'll notice that the messaging, the branding on the page, that's part of what you want in a platform, your ability to make that event yours. And I think with a structural aspect to this, one of the things that our platform allows you to do is also not only have events that can be hosted by a group, hosted, a collection of schools coming together, and or your own individual school. You also have the ability to have more of an interview, round robin interviewing style. So some of the events that we host are free flowing and open-ended, and as a job seeker, I can go in and out of that event whenever I want to. And others are by appointment. That's one of the benefits of a program like ours, or a platform like ours, is that we do have that. You can choose the style of your event. So for instance, that Sarah event, they had it more by appointment. And this one, again, similar type concept, where there is some restriction around the format, in that the organizations will be making selections so that as they do their one-to-one meetings, it's on a scheduled basis, meaning we've given the candidates a chance to actually accept an invitation, and therefore on that event day, it's more of an interview style. Now you can have that interview style in a more open-ended one, but at that point, it tends to be more free flowing. So the candidate may or may not be prepped for this more traditional kind of interview style. But if you want to set up an event that allows for that, you can, with our system, we call it RSVIP because it requires you to actually, you do need to accept that invitation. So you essentially RSVP, but in this sort of format, it just gives you a slightly different configuration. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to also dig in a little deeper into the back end of the system so you can see from a standpoint of the way our system works, of course, with the concept that hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what's important in a virtual event platform as well. So what you're looking at right now, this is what I've shown you up until this point, is what it looks like outside of the dashboard. So that means you as either a job seeker or you as an organization, you can have all that information displayed. You can have your chat times that have been reflected on that event, and then the postings. And then as the job seekers are looking at that event, they can decide whether they want to register. And once they do, they'll have a dashboard similarly. This is what I'm showing right now is going to be based on your view as an organization that might be hosting an event. And I want to do that because there's some depth behind this that'll help you better understand more about what some of the platforms have, certainly ours in particular, but some of them are going to have variations on this, and this will just help you better know what to expect and or what to ask for when you're looking at platforms. So this is the dashboard, and I'm in as a sample organization. So one of the things you'll notice up here in your dashboard is that you've got an admin panel. So in the events that you're going to participate in, obviously, if you've taken the time to go about putting information out there, you'd really like for that information to live on so that the next time you do an event, you don't have to rethink it. So Duval doesn't have to rethink that profile page that they've actually set up in the prior event. So you're always going to have what we call a profile page, but essentially that's what's going to be shared with those that are outside of the platform looking at the event. And so this is the kind of thing where it's easy for you to upload your logo or add an image here, or insert the information that you want to show on your profile page. You saw that example had a video, so I could certainly do that. If I click in here, you'll see there's a toolbar, so it's easy for me to do that. But the thing about service, and this is something we're especially proud of, is that you want to know that if you need help with these kind of functions, there's somebody there that's going to help with this sort of function, and we are there to do that. And I think that's the example of what you want in any kind of service provider, because like I said earlier, not everybody's equally tech savvy. And, for me, it might be easy to go in here and, change colors because I understand the toolbar. I might even be HTML savvy and I understand that little button there. I might not be. And so what about me? Well, that's where we can really help. And so it is easy for them to do if they have some sense of, adding information. Many people copy paste and then they'll tweak it using the toolbar. But if you need help with that, that's the kind of thing that we or your partners would be available for. The point of contact information, that's always important, I think, and something that people can often forget, because the job seekers in our platform will have access to that profile information after the event. So if you have inserted point of contact information or any of those links, they're going to have access to that after the event has taken place. So the more you fill out the profile and the more you make it meaningful, I think that the better it is for you as a participant in an event. So just keep in mind, most platforms are going to have something similar. Just know that this is an opportunity to sell a bit more about your group, your particular district, or your particular school, as you saw in some of those cases. So, and they all, I think, when you consider the opportunity to have that information live on, which that is not necessarily true for all platforms, it even makes it more compelling to spend a little time thinking through that. And I do think, I remember one particular profile that they had a really catchy line, and it was one of those that you just are going to tend to look at, and it had a layer of, it sounded fun. It sounded like a fun group of people to go visit with. And they were in Florida and they were talking about flip-flops and, and flip-flops to computer. And it was just a really good example of them putting some personality into it. And I think that's a good idea if you want to communicate more about who you are leading up to the event. That said, if you want to have different variations on your profile, so sometimes let's say you were doing a different event, maybe it has a theme, maybe it was recruiting people that were living with disabilities, or it was recruiting people that have very specific skill sets, and or maybe diversity events where you want to communicate more about your commitment to diversity. And that profile page, you could have fair specific profile pages. So just bear in mind, you can always have in our platform a default profile, but you can tweak those if you want to for other audiences, and that can be useful. You don't have to rethink any of that again. With users, some platforms will have a variation on the number of users. You can have as many users as you want in ours. And so if you have 20 recruiters or 50 recruiters, it's okay. That's just for our point of view, it's all included. And so you'll notice that you can have multiple users, and then those users, once they're tied to your account, that master account that you have, they can participate in any of those events. You don't have to rethink that all. And you don't have to add those new users each and every time. Once they're there, they're there. You certainly, if they leave, you want to disable them. If they need help with password resets, you could handle that, but we can too. So, but you've got this autonomy over this kind of information, who's in your user list, and all of that is going to live on beyond the events. The thing that's nice about this is you can add documents that would be available to people that come visit with you. And so this is a good example of documents that you might go ahead and upload, and then that would be useful information for those visitors that come to join the live session. Now, in addition to, the platform itself is going to, in our case, offer typed format. It's going to offer video format, presentation format. There are going to be things that you're going to say repeatedly. So stored responses can be a really good idea. We've seen people really use this very, very well. You want to have some of those handy, because you could have specific deadlines or links or other things that you just know are going to be repeated. And that is certainly one of the benefits of having information stored on a computer, is that you can reuse some of it. And even if you personalize it before you send it to the room, go ahead and think through. Part of your strategy is, what is the messaging that we want to communicate out to that group when this event's going on, and go ahead and prep some of those messages. Make sure that if you have links, if you have personal messages that you want to share when you're in the room, sometimes people want to give contact information. Well, this might be the kind of thing that I want to make available. So I don't have to repeat that in a typed format every time. I can just click a button and use that in the system. The stored messages, they also will live on. Now, one thing that's going to be really important is having access to the candidate pool. And that I've mentioned before. In our system, you have that candidates category. And then when you click on the fair, and the reason you have to click the fair here is because many of our clients have been in multiple events, right? So if I was going back to look at the candidates that came from that Southern Alliance event, it would be a different set of candidates from the one that we're showing here today. But all those candidates would still be in the system beyond that fair. And I've had a lot of people say they'll go back in. Maybe they've extracted the information, and that's possible here as well, and they've put it into their ATS system. But the good news is you can get back in. So if, let's say, one of the personalized questions that you in your particular fair you set up was, years of work history, or maybe you ask for certain certifications. One of the benefits of hosting your own event is you get to choose what questions are asked, and those registration questions are something that then are filterable in our system. So if I want to narrow it down based on certifications, or I want to narrow it down based on years of experience, or whatever the key criteria are, maybe we ask a question about whether you're willing to reload or not. That kind of information would then govern the fields that I could search in on this fair. And that would include the keyword search for the resume. So this is useful too, because there might be certain key terminology in resumes that are not going to fit into these categories. I could search by those kind of key terms, and anybody who's uploaded their CV or resume, that would narrow down the candidates of interest for me as a recruiter. So all those recruiters that you added to your account, they can be they can have access to, and they can look at that pool of candidates. So if you have hundreds, and sometimes there are thousands, depending on the size of that event, then you'll be able to go in and see the candidates that might be of interest to you as an individual recruiter. And then you can come in here and say, all right, go ahead and let me, after I've used these criteria to narrow down the candidate pool, click a button here, like those candidates. Now those liked candidates are in the separate category, which can be useful. And I can go in here and say, okay, time for me to pull these candidates out of the system. Maybe I even make some notes on that candidate record that'll go along with it. And I want to pull them out, and I want to bundle those resumes together. I want to grab this candidate spreadsheet, and off I go with that information. And I don't have to worry about whether I retrieved it out of the system or not. I have it. It can be really helpful to me down the path. But if I needed to get back in, I can. The candidates can express interest too. So just know that if they choose to do that, so maybe they're looking at all those elementary schools or all those high schools, and they know certain ones that they're very interested in, they can click a button that would give an expressed interest category with that candidate appearing in this subcategory here. So you'll notice that there's some icons that represent that kind of information, and that might be a group that you look at first. And that would make sense because they've let you know they're interested. Why not look at them as well and just see if they match your criteria? So bear in mind, these kind of tabs here can be very useful for narrowing down the pool of candidates that you're particularly interested in as a recruiter. Same kind of thing when you interact with somebody live in the live format, you can click a button and they'll appear here. So all of these are handy tools that are just part of a platform like ours. And I think also the messaging section. So the messaging along with the reporting can be helpful. So the messaging is an example here where you could send out a message to a lot of those pre-registered candidates and remind them you're going to be in that event. Maybe you're going to be doing a presentation at a certain point during the day. Remind them of that. Why not? Get your information into their email, and then ultimately they can come in, see that message, reply back to you if you allow for that. And they could actually just have some preliminary dialogue if you wanted to. But it's a good way to be proactive. So any of these events in our system, you can use that tool if you choose to. Now, some people export it, use their own CRM, but you don't have to. It's just all integrated. It's built in. The reporting, same kind of thing. You can pull the candidate spreadsheet if you want the whole group of candidates, but you can also see some of the information you're going to likely want, which is relating to the history of the conversations that are going to happen, and also the listing of the candidates that came to a given room. So those topics and those rooms that are breaking down maybe the kind of interest they have based on the topic of that room, you could see the candidates in that spreadsheet and know, okay, they're interested in these kind of roles versus this kind of role. So the participant report, the history of the chats that happen that are typed, the candidate access, all of that built in. And I just want to highlight before I go to show you more of what the interactivity looks like. Tools, resources, very important. You need to know that we have those, but also that you as a group getting prepared. I said I was going to mention this about preparing for a fair. Very important always to go and look at some of that resources information. Most people in any platform are only going to use just a fragment of the toolkit. And I've found that over years, often people would come back to us and go, oh, I didn't know you had that. Well, we did. We always did. In fact, we've had video for years. And so I just want you to know that a lot of times it's part of the prep work that it's easy to get pushed aside, but it's really important when you're looking at how do I optimize my performance. I mentioned the job posting, so I won't go there, but I just know that it's part of what I think is important in a system, because you do want to highlight certain roles often. Many times people have a lot of different positions. So the way our system would work, when you click on the join, it would take you here to the rooms list. And this, if you've seen our platform before, you'll look at this and see that it's different looking, and it is, because this is the new platform. We still can use the system the way it's been used by others for years, but it has a new look and feel, and we're rolling this out now. So I just want you to just be aware of why you might notice that it's a bit different. Along with some of our rebranding, we've made some updates. But one thing you're going to notice about this is that you have the ability to go into, based on the topic, any given room. So I'm going to come in here right now, and you're going to see I'm in this room, and I'm going to say hello all, that's me in the main room. So you'll notice that there goes Evan. Evan's in the room. There's another recruiter in the room. And you'll notice too, so, the other recruiter said something, so she can contribute to that as well. So you can have what we consider to be more of a group dialogue, but you could also have a private discussion. I think that's important because there can be certain things that people either want to ask privately or that need to be addressed privately. So if you look at this, I'm going to say hi, and you can see that now I'm in a private discussion with this candidate. So not only can I have multiple private discussions, but I could also keep tabs on what's going on in that main room. So if I wanted to, there's Christine. She said something back to me. She's interested in more opportunities. So again, I might go ahead and have this dialogue with her. Maybe I do look at those stored messages and say, I want to give her some information about me. So I I want to go back and forth with this candidate, but I don't necessarily just have to be completely focused on one person, because obviously, she might take some time to respond to me. I could also be having a private dialogue with someone else. So you can see I could go back and forth with this particular candidate as well. So we have this ability to have one-to-ones in a private format that can be just reflective of that particular conversation. But you could also still have what's going on in the main room. And in that main room, you might choose to have a presentation. So if I wanted to click the button here, I could go ahead and share. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get off of the video here and Zoom, and I'll show you what I mean. So maybe I want to have a panel discussion. I could do that here, or I could go ahead and I could share my screen. So let's just say that I want to give, a brief PowerPoint, or, just talk through things that I think are important to people in filling out our application. I could open tabs and I could go back and forth, and you'll notice that I'm sharing my screen. So I could have a screen share in the main room. I could also, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and say, look, I want to do a panel discussion. So let's just say me and Kathy Recruiter, we want to be on camera together. So I could go ahead and decide that, myself and or the recruiter, hi. So we could have a panel discussion. So you can have concurrent users from your team as recruiters sharing information with a group. So in this sort of scenario, you can have multiple people in the room benefiting from what's going on in a collective way, but still you have that personal aspect. Now, one thing that we could also do is use what we call a queue, and that queue feature is built into our platform to allow you to have a wait list. So busy rooms might like the idea of having a queue. So if you look at this, these candidates both have a queue symbol next to their name, and you'll notice that I'm a queue moderator. Well, that's why I have my room over here. So there's two people waiting in that queue. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to give that candidate a chance, and that candidate has accepted the request to be in my queue and take my meeting. So they waited for a little bit too long. 75 minutes was a long wait time. That probably means I don't have enough recruiters. In our example here, it's because Christina's been hanging out waiting on me to do this. But in any case, what you'll notice is that you've got this ability to have one-to-one meetings in a queue room. And what the queue does is it allows it to be more structured and how we progress through these candidates. So if I wanted to have a one-to-one meeting with all the people that came into my room at some point, if they wanted to be part of the queue, there she is again, then we could do this in a one-to-one format. But the queue serves as my way of pushing people into the room on a as come basis according to the wait list. So the good part about that is I don't have to go look at that list and determine who I want to interact with. I could, but I don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead. Thank you. And I'm going to have my good meeting with Christine, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end that session. And then next up is going to be, okay, next candidate that's waiting, and I could take that next person in the queue. So what I don't have to do is go back over here into this room in the main and actually figure out who I want to visit with. You'll notice there's a queue still because there's another candidate waiting. But Christine came back into the room. Maybe she wants to watch our presentation, and she does in fact have a check mark. That means she's been through the queue. So let's just say I come back over there for a second or two, and maybe I have to go grab a bottle of water, and then I'm ready for the next person. So what we like about this format is it allows me to use as much time as I want to on a per candidate basis, so it isn't timed in that case. And that, I think, can be very useful, because if I want to spend a bit more time with some of these candidates or less time with some of these candidates, I'm not promising them a time block. Now that, I think, really makes sense when you haven't selected the candidate pool. When you select the candidate pool ahead of time and you've looked at their resume, then maybe time sessions really do make sense. And we do have an option for that. But in this sort of variety, when you're considering, how do I navigate the free flowing traffic of encouraging people to come by whether they have an appointment or not, and still be able to manage the flow of candidates, then I can do this using this queue format. And I think that can be a really good way to get the best of both worlds. I can still have this group discussion, but if I wanted to have several recruiters on my team and they want to go ahead and be part of this queue feature, then they can take these candidates as they want to and spend more or less time depending on how much of a match they are. And I think, that's an important part of this, right? I mean, the candidates themselves want to optimize their time too. And if ultimately they don't have the criteria you're looking for, it really doesn't behoove them to spend a great deal of time either. So I'm going to go ahead and say, thanks so much, Evan, but I'm going to end your session here. So, all right. So that said, you'll notice that I can be in more than one room at a time. This room's nice because it does give this aspect of saying, okay, I want to maybe type to my colleague here privately. What's nice about a private room is that this recruiter and I can have a private discussion. Maybe I'm saying, hey, what's the salary range on that position? Or, what's the deadline for that position? I can do that in a room. And so you could have multiple recruiters here. Candidates can't come into that room and we could dialogue here. Maybe I need to take a quick break. Can you cover me? I got to get out of the queue. I got to move on because something came up I didn't expect. That kind of thing. So you can have private room for your staff. You can have a queue where people, as they want to become part of that moderation of the queue, you don't have to prep them ahead of time in terms of, you want them to know what to do in the system, but you don't have to commit. If you had a busy room and you had some people on standby, you could have them jump in and they could be part of that queue, narrow down the candidate pool. And then you always want to have some, I think, you want to have at least one, maybe two people that are going to moderate the main room, because there are lots of things that can happen in the main room that can be beneficial to everybody, and that's really useful. So again, this is a bit of how our system works. We, if you look at the new look and feel, you'll notice it's really designed to have some additional visuals, logos. That about section just gives me more information before I even join that room. Some people prefer this view. It's more of a listing, and I can quickly see the time frame. Some people want to narrow things down by times. The longer your hours are, the more that might be helpful to the job seekers. So anyway, this is some of the great thing that you can see in this kind of not only one-to-one personalized format, but also sharing information that can be useful for all. And I think that, again, is part of what's really nice about a platform that's built to allow for it. The meetings that when we do an event like this, and I'll just very, very briefly touch on this. When you do an event that's what we consider to be an RSVIP event, what that really means is these candidates, they only get a meeting if you've selected them. So your recruiters have to go in and they have to create time slots. So I might decide that I want to have, 12 time slots during the window of that event. And then I go ahead, I create those meeting time slots here. And then I want to go back and I want to ultimately pick candidates that are going to be part of that event for me. So each individual recruiter is going to go ahead and, as you can see, I've got 2 open meeting slots. I've got 3 first choice candidates, 1 alternate, and 2 scheduled. Ultimately, this format allows for people to be selected. So I can look at the candidate, I can click on their information. Once I'm ready to, I can go ahead and I can add them as a first choice, as an alternate. And this gives me the ability to then send the system to send out invitations, and those candidates accept or decline that invitation and fill up my calendar. So I can always go into my dashboard, see which of the candidates have been sent, first choice, alternate. What's nice about this is as they slot into my calendar, I'll see them there. And then again, during that event, it would be exclusive, and it is timed, because if you want to set up a lot of meetings that are structured, you don't want to run into the next person's time block. So you want to make sure that there's some legitimate cutoff to that, but it can be a calendar that is set up prior to the event, and then and only then will that candidate have the option to interact with me. So I won't go through the interaction example here because it's very similar technology with using our whole look and feel that you just saw. But what's very different about it is that not all the candidates that register would have a chance to have the interview, only the ones that are selected by an individual recruiter. So every recruiter gets their calendar set up, and then it's really a more of a round robin kind of format. And we can have as many of those meetings as the candidates that fit our criteria. So it is different, it is timed. Again, the value of timed based interviews in my mind is if both parties know they want to invest that degree of time, because now we fundamentally think that there's a good reason to get together. So let's, make the most of it. So anyway, that's a little bit about that. I'll come back over here. And again, I'm so sorry about having my PowerPoint there for a minute or two, but what I just want to end up with, I know, preparing for the event, I might've touched on a little bit of this, but I do want to just reiterate with virtual events, whoever the organizers are, and we try to support that. We send out a lot of communication leading up to the event to try to get the stakeholders involved with, going to the training, going to look at the candidates that are in the event already, so you can better understand maybe some of those that might be joining, or maybe you want to send out some of that communication ahead of the fair, but really making sure that you understand how you're going to handle that event day. So, instead of just pushing people to your website and saying, here, go here for all our job postings, you have a strategy. Are you going to give a presentation? Are you going to have a panel discussion? What kind of things are you going to do to try to engage people in the room? If you do it well, one or two comments from your team, to ask the group, well, what do you like about teaching, or anything that will get people excited about the collective conversation can be a good way to keep people engaged and keep people on board in your room. So think about that ahead of the event, rather than just passively waiting and seeing who's going to show up, because it can make all the difference in the world. And also, I just need to reiterate the technology check. I mean, people use a lot of different technologies. You can have blocks on your browser for some reason because of other tools. You might use a camera differently. And, so no matter what the platform is, you need to check to make sure that that is going to work with your camera. You might use something on a regular basis, but whatever the case may be, maybe you downloaded an update on your browser and now something's different. It always makes sense to be on the device you're going to use during that event day. Make sure your camera's connected. Make sure you can get to the site. Make sure that there's nothing that looks out askew. So on the event day, you're ready to go. And the best idea is, if the platform allows it, we do, is log in and get together with one of your colleagues and go in and just, click around and private chat with each other, get on video, see each other, say hey to each other. You can do that. And the last thing I just want to say here, just in terms of publicizing, I know we just have a few more minutes, but, I mean, we get feedback, I think, around how people publicize. Obviously, a lot of people push out email campaigns. I think that's a great way to do it, because obviously they need the link. You can absolutely put some press out there. We just had an event that was hosted that they ended up with some TV exposure. Job boards, certainly you could post on other job boards and have a link to the site where you're going to have the interaction happen. Career advisors can often be very helpful. Certainly colleges of education, career advisors a lot of times are very invested in making sure that their candidates that are coming out of school are going to get the right job. That can be a great way to go. And certainly social media and even website notification. You'd be amazed at the number of events that we host, and we'll go to look at the site and they may or may not be there, as even just publicizing that event's happening. So, I know it can sometimes be a challenge to try to get in touch with the IT people that might govern all of that. But if you plan ahead, hopefully you can make that happen, and you're getting the best possible exposure. The last thing I just want to say here, and then Tim, I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and come back to say whatever else you might want to add. you know, we do get a lot of feedback from candidates. This was even before COVID, these comments here, but I thought they were useful because what they're reiterating, you know, people that are trying to make location changes, they're talking here, they were in a different state. I mean, they just can't do traditional recruiting events typically. This is just a huge benefit for them. And here they're talking about, you know, their ability to speak with 6 different employers during one planning period at school, right? I mean, they can do this from anywhere. And they literally were doing this in a way that, as they said, was much easier for them than devoting a full day on a Saturday. So very much, I think, just examples. Here you have some more from the school district side. You know, people love having the access to the candidates, being able to multitask. That's what they're talking about here. Bringing principals into the conversation can be really important. You know, being able to be cost efficient, also very important. But getting the word out, the branding. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, with really competitive landscape, it is in fact going to be in part marketing and in part recruiting, right? You've got to separate yourself out as much as you possibly can and get your communication out. So with all that to say, we're real proud to be part of this ecosystem of virtual events, in that we have helped support so many schools in the recruitment effort. We do partner up very closely with a lot of colleges and universities, so we can end up being, you know, an exposure vehicle a lot of times too when you host with us, because candidates from other events can see your event. But anyway, we do pride ourselves in support. We do have very flexible format, a lot of the advanced features that I know people want, and we try to keep it really affordable too. We're proud of the fact that we do a per event pricing. So if you just want to do one event with us, that's absolutely fine. We're not trying to force you into a long-term, you know, expensive contract. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and you know, try to give you just a minute or two. I hope I left enough time, Tim, to just field any other kind of information that you might want me to share here. And thank you, by the way, for letting us share more about what we do and who we are.
Thank you so much, Gayle, and thank you,
Yeah.
Christina, for playing your part in the demonstration.
Thank you.
Yeah, the demonstration was great. You know, I think people will really appreciate that, both who are attending live today and seeing the recording in the future. But yeah, no, it was a very thorough overview of things to consider when considering a platform for virtual interview, you know, job fairs, and very specific, you know, very great thorough review of CareerEco as a platform option. So I haven't seen any questions coming in,
Okay.
but
Sure.
again, I think it was a great presentation, and really appreciate the information.
Thank you so much, Tim. Really appreciate it. We know, and I just want to end with this too. We know that teachers are some of the most important people in our society, and you know, the idea of helping people find the right opportunity from a professional point of view, and to help engage more people into the teaching profession, for us, that's really important to feel like we're part of that. So we fundamentally believe this is an important task, which is trying to enable this. So we're here to support in any way that we can, and we appreciate you learning a little bit more about us, and anytime we can help, just let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those kind words. We all appreciate
Sure.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with everything, Tim. Thanks for all your leadership. It's really been good to get to know you, and thanks so much for what you're doing for the teachers out there as well.
Thank you, Gayle. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
both.
Everyone, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.